Imagine a place where people no longer hide their sins. No more shame, no more hesitation, no more boundary between right and wrong. A place where what is evil is not only accepted, but celebrated, protected, and called the norm. A place where if you dare to speak the truth, you become the dangerous one. And if you try to fix what is broken, you are the one treated like the problem that needs to be removed. That is not a fictional story. It was a civilization that once existed. A civilization full of life, crowded, active, and outwardly thriving. But rotten all the way down to its roots. And the most terrifying part was not only what they did, but the way they believed they were right. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. There are stories in history that are not told for entertainment. They are told as warnings. And today's story is not only about a city that disappeared, but about an invisible boundary. When a society goes so far that there is no road back. Before we go deeper, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support the channel, so we can continue bringing you stories that do not only change the way you see the past, but force you to rethink your own present. This story begins with one man, not a king, not a warrior, but a man carrying a mission. Lut alayhi salam was chosen by Allah and sent to a distant land, valleys near the region of what is now Jordan, where busy cities like Sodom and the settlements around it were filled with people. He did not come with power. He did not come with an army. He came with a message so simple, yet heavier than mountains. Return to your Creator. Live in accordance with the nature you were created with. Stop before it is too late. But Lut did not rush. He did not walk into the city and immediately start speaking. He observed. He listened. He walked through the streets, the markets, the places where people gathered. He wanted to understand them before trying to change them. Because a prophet does not only speak, he must understand the hearts of those standing in front of him. And then, day after day, he began to see the truth. At first, there were only small signs, certain looks, certain disturbing behaviors. But the longer he stayed, the more he observed, the more he realized. This was not simply a society that had gone astray like others he had seen. This was a society that had chosen its path, consciously. What elsewhere was hidden in darkness. Here took place in broad daylight. It was not just immoral behavior. It was open, confident, even proud. People no longer tried to cover it. They were not afraid of judgment, because in their world, there was no one left to judge them. And then a cold truth slowly formed in Lut's mind. This was no longer individual sin. This was a system, a culture, an identity, and it did not stop there. He began to realize something even more terrifying. Strangers entering this city were not welcomed. They were targeted, exploited, treated like prey. There was no law to protect them, no honor, no hospitality, the very thing human beings once took pride in. A city where outsiders are not safe is a city that has already lost its soul. Lut stood in the middle of all of it, looking at a city that from a distance seemed calm. But inside was filled with invisible fractures. When the sun went down, when the night covered the streets, that was not when the city rested. It was when its true nature woke up. And in that moment, he understood what not everyone has the courage to face. This was not a place that needed gentle repair. This was a place moving toward an ending that could not be avoided. But he still began his mission. Because even if there is only the smallest spark of hope left, a prophet is not allowed to give up. And that is when the real confrontation began. Between one man and an entire civilization. At first, Lut alayhi salam still believed their problem could be corrected through words. He thought that, like other communities, if he only reminded them, if he awakened their conscience, then they would return to what is right. But he was wrong. Because in this place, the problem was not that they did not know. It was that they had chosen. What Lut saw was no longer scattered acts of immorality. It was an entire social order turned upside down. Things that violated human nature were not only accepted, but openly displayed in broad daylight, as if declaring that there was no longer any need to hide. They did not see it as wrong anymore. On the contrary, they saw it as freedom, as the right to live however they wanted. And the most dangerous part was that they began defending it. When Lut stood before them, not with hatred, but with a call to return to what is right, he did not receive reflection. He received laughter. But it was not the laughter of embarrassment or discomfort. It was the laughter of people who had fully convinced themselves that they were on the right side of history. They looked at him as if he were the backward one, a man trying to drag them back into an order they had already rejected. And in their eyes, Lut was the dangerous one, because he was not just different from them. He challenged the very way they defined right and wrong. Then one day, one of them spoke up, not in rage, but with cold confidence. They said that they were the pure ones, that they were simply living true to themselves. And Lut, the man standing alone among them, was treated like the one trying to contaminate their society with outdated warnings. That was the moment when everything became clearer than ever. When a society begins to call what is wrong right, and what is right wrong, and then the problem is no longer behavior, it is perception. And once perception itself has been twisted, no words can pierce through anymore. Lut understood that he could not keep approaching them the same way, not because his message was weak, but because their hearts had shut completely. So he changed. He no longer stood in the middle of the city square to argue. He no longer tried to persuade those who had no desire to listen. He moved to the edges of the city. There, between the fields and the roads leading into Sodom, he waited. Not to avoid them, but to protect those who had not yet entered. Travelers, strangers passing through, unaware that they were about to step into a place where they would not be safe. Imagine a man standing in the middle of a dusty road, stopping a stranger who has just completed a long journey, not to ask for help, not to make a trade, but to warn him, do not go in there. You do not know what they will do to you. Some stopped, but most kept going. Because from the outside, Sodom looked like any other city. Nothing in its appearance revealed the trap inside. And then stories began to come back to Lut. People who went in and were never the same again. What happened to them did not need to be spoken aloud. It was enough to see the eyes of those who survived, to understand. Each time, Lut felt a heavier burden pressed down on his heart. Not because he had failed to try, but because he knew he could not save everyone. At night, when the city lights came alive, he would return again. Not because he wanted to be there, but because his mission was not over. He kept speaking, kept warning, kept calling them to turn back before it was too late. But this time, the laughter was gone. In its place came irritation, then anger, and finally, threats. One group blocked his path. Their eyes no longer held mockery. They were colder now, more final. They told him they had heard enough, that he needed to stop, that he was disturbing their order. And if he did not stay silent, they would force him to leave. It was no longer a mild warning. It was the final line. But what hurt Lut more than all those words did not come from the streets. It came from inside his own home. The woman he had married, hoping to build a bridge between himself and these people, stood on the other side. She did not merely fail to believe him. She was ashamed of him. Every word he spoke about Allah, every time he spoke of morality, irritated her. He became a stranger inside his own house, a man standing between two worlds. On one side, a society that had rejected him. On the other, a family that no longer stood with him. And in the middle of all that, he still continued. Because sometimes, truth does not need a crowd. It only needs one person who refuses to give up. There is a kind of loneliness that does not come from having no one around you, but from no one understanding you anymore. Lut alayhi salam entered exactly that kind of loneliness. Not for a day, not for a month, but year after year, as every word he spoke seemed to fall without leaving a trace, as every effort he made only widened the distance between him and the world around him. He continued. He kept going out every morning, kept returning to the city every evening. I kept looking for opportunities to call them back to what is right. But inside him, a truth was slowly taking shape. Not everyone wants to be saved. And when a person does not want to change, even the truth becomes meaningless to them. Time passed, and the result became too clear to deny. In an entire large city, crowded with people, filled with lives, families, and hopes, only two believed him. His two daughters, not people of influence, not people of status, just two young hearts, pure enough to recognize what is right. That number was not just a result. It was a verdict, a sign that the heart of an entire society had shut itself closed. Can you imagine what that feels like? Standing among thousands, and only two people standing with you. Speaking the truth, but hearing it become lost in the noise of denial. Not because you were not loud enough, but because no one wanted to hear. But what hurt Lut most was not the rejection of the crowd. It was the fracture inside his own family. The home that should have been his refuge became the place where he felt most alone. His wife did not stand with him. She did not need to speak loudly. She did not need violent arguments. One look, one sigh, one silence filled with contempt was enough to make everything clear. She did not believe in what he was doing. She did not see what he saw. And deep inside, she had likely been standing with that society for a long time already. Each time Lut returned home after a long day, carrying exhaustion and a fragile hope, he did not find comfort. He found distance. A distance that could not be closed. A distance between two people living under the same roof, but belonging to entirely different worlds. That is when loneliness is no longer outside of you. It enters inside. It sits with you in silence. It follows you into sleep and wakes up with you every morning. But Lut still did not stop, because his mission was not measured by how many believed. It was measured by his steadfastness, by whether he would continue speaking the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. And then, almost inevitably, society changed the way it dealt with him. No more light laughter, no more mocking amusement. In its place came discomfort, a slow-burning discomfort, like fire beneath the surface. They no longer saw him as a harmless, strange man. They began to see him as a threat. Because truth, even when rejected, still has power, and it makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to face what they do not want to face. And the easiest way to escape that discomfort is to eliminate the one carrying the truth. One evening, While Lut was trying to speak to a group of them, the entire atmosphere changed. No one laughed. No one argued. They looked at him with a cold finality. One of them stepped forward, his voice not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything. They told him it was enough, that he had to stop, that he was interfering with the way they lived, trying to change what they had already chosen. And if he did not stay silent, they would force him to leave this place. No more hidden meaning, no more politeness. It was a direct threat. In that moment, Lut realized something he had likely felt for a long time, but had never fully accepted. He was no longer trying to change a society. He was standing in front of a society that had already decided it did not want to change. And when a group reaches that point, anyone who says otherwise becomes the enemy. He stood there in the middle of them, with no one beside him, no one defending him, no power, no backing, only faith and truth. But sometimes, that is all a person needs. Because in a world where everything has been turned upside down, to remain standing, to refuse to bow, to refuse to compromise, is already the greatest victory. And Lut remained standing there, alone, but never broken. There are moments in history when everything changes in a single night. Not because people choose to change, but because judgment arrives. That night, for Lut alayhi salam, did not begin with any obvious sign. It began very normally. A quiet evening, familiar tasks, the feeling of a day like any other. But sometimes, that ordinary feeling is the most frightening sign of all, because no one realizes everything is about to end. Lut's daughters were the first to see them. 3 men standing at the edge of the city. No luggage, no signs of a long journey, but carrying a beauty that could not be explained. Not ordinary beauty, but the kind that makes people stop, stare, and feel that something is not from this world. In that moment, she understood immediately what her father would understand next. If these men entered the city, they would never leave in a normal way. She ran, without thinking, without hesitation. Each hurried step on the dusty road, her heart pounding in her chest. When she found her father, she could barely get the words out. But what she said was enough to make everything inside Lut freeze. 3 strangers, extraordinary in appearance, in danger of seeing. Lut needed to hear no more. He immediately went toward the gate, and when he saw them, he understood. These were not ordinary guests. There was something beyond anything he had known. But that did not make him feel safe. It made him more afraid, because he knew this place. He approached them, trying to keep his voice calm. They needed a place to stay for the night, a simple request. But for Lut, it was a problem with no answer. If he refused them, he would betray the duty of a human being. But if he brought them inside, he might be leading them into a nightmare. He tried to find another way, suggested that they go elsewhere, told them this city was not like other places, and told them the people here were not safe. But they did not react. They did not show fear. They did not hesitate. They only looked at him as if they already knew everything. And then Lut understood that he could not refuse. He led them in, trying to choose the least visible roads. Every step felt heavy. Every glance around him filled him with fear that someone had seen. He told them, not once, but many times, as if making one final effort to make them understand. This is the worst place I know. But they remained silent. That silence was not ignorance. It felt like certainty. When they entered the house, Lut felt a brief wave of relief. The door closed, separating them from the outside world. For one short moment, he believed that maybe things would be fine. If no one knew, if the night passed quietly, then perhaps they would be safe. But inside that very house, the danger had already begun. His wife saw them, and in her eyes, there was no concern, no fear, only something else. A sharp alertness, a flash of recognition, and a decision. She left, without a word, without any obvious sign, just a step out of the house and into the darkness. And within a very short time, the city began to move. The news spread like fire through dry grass. Whispers turned into calls, calls turned into noise, and noise turned into a crowd. They came in groups, more and more, until the road outside Lut's house was filled with human shadows. Inside, Lut began to hear it. First, footsteps, then voices, then people calling his name, and then pounding on the door. Hard, repeated, impatient. He stepped toward the window, looked outside, and what he saw made the blood in his body feel cold on not a few people, but a small group. The whole city was there. Faces he knew, now twisted by desire with no restraint left in it. He turned back, searching for an explanation, and then he realized his wife was gone. The truth hit like a blade. No one needed to tell him. He knew. She had told them. The one closest to him had opened the door to the nightmare. The pounding on the door grew even more violent. Voices outside demanded that he bring the guests out. No more hidden intent, no more pretending. They had come to take. Lut stepped outside, closing the door behind him, trying to block them. He spoke, he pleaded, he reminded them of Allah, of honor, of whatever remained of their humanity. But there was nothing left in them to reach. They laughed, they mocked, they tried to push past him, and that was the moment when Lut felt complete helplessness. One man against an entire city, no one standing with him, nowhere to run, no way to protect those inside. And in that moment, he no longer spoke to them. He turned toward the heavens and cried out, "If only I had some strength. If only I had some powerful support." That was not the complaint of a weak man. It was the cry of a man who had reached the final limit of what he could bear. And in that very instant, behind him, a voice spoke. Calm, not hurried, but carrying a weight that changed the air itself. They were not the ones who needed protection. They were the ones sent to end everything. After the truth was revealed, everything was no longer in human hands. The guests, Lut, alayhi salam, had tried so desperately to protect were not men in need of shelter. They were messengers carrying a decree already decided. No more argument, no more warning, no more second chances, only time. And that time was quickly running out. The angel spoke to Lut plainly, without delay or softness. Leave in the night. Do not wait until morning. Do not look back, and take your family with you. But then something was said that made his heart heavy. His wife would not go with them. She belonged to this place, not only in body, but by choice. And that choice had already determined her end. There was no time to argue, no time to hold on. Sometimes truth comes in a form that human beings do not want to accept, but must accept anyway. That night became thick and heavy. No voices, no lights, only hurried footsteps leaving behind a place once called home. Lut led his two daughters in silence, and step by step farther away from the city. His wife walked behind them, but not with the same rhythm, not with the same direction. Her body was leaving, but her heart had already stayed behind. There are people who leave with their feet, but never truly leave. The command of the angels kept echoing in Lut's mind like an order that could not be broken. Do not look back. No matter what you hear, no matter what you feel, no matter what happens behind you, do not turn around. They walked through roads that were once familiar and had now become strange. Every step was a separation, not only from a city, but from memory, from life, from the years already lived. But Lut did not stop. He did not slow down, because he understood. There are times when looking back is the same as destroying yourself. Then came the silence, an unnatural silence, not peace, but the stillness that comes before a storm. No insects, no wind, as if the whole world were holding its breath. Then the first sound came, not loud, not sudden, just a slight trembling, deep beneath the earth. But it did not stop. It spread, it grew, until the ground began shaking beneath their feet, no longer a vibration, but the movement of an entire land. Behind them, the unimaginable was taking place. Not just an earthquake, not just destruction. The entire city, with everything inside it, homes, people, streets, was lifted from the earth. Not by human force, but by a power no one can resist. It was raised, higher and higher, beyond everything familiar, as if reality itself had been torn from its place. Then, everything was overturned. What had been above became below, and what had once been the foundation became the point of collapse. And in that moment, nothing remained to hold it in place. It fell. But that was not the end. The sky opened, not to send blessing, but to carry out judgment. Stones blazing with fire, appointed for each target, rained down. Not randomly, not by accident. Each stone reached exactly where it was meant to go. The sound of impact was not merely destruction, it was finality, not only for a city, but for an entire civilization. The ground could not hold them. It split apart, collapsed, swallowed everything deep beneath it. And from the place that had once been full of life, a body of water rose, hot, bitter, undrinkable. A body of water not made for life, but left as a mark of death. That place would later be called the Dead Sea, a name, but also a warning. Meanwhile, on the dark road, Lut's wife could not bear it. Even after hearing the command, even after knowing, her heart could not let go. She turned back, just once, just one look. But sometimes, one choice is enough to decide everything. In that instant, everything stopped for her. No chance to correct herself, no time to regret. She became part of what had been left behind, not because she did not know, but because she chose. Lut did not turn back. He did not look. He kept walking, leading his daughters away from a place that no longer existed. But deep inside, he knew. He did not need to see, to know what had happened. When the first light of morning touched the horizon, he stood on high ground. Behind him, there were no cities anymore, no familiar roads, only a vast emptiness and a still body of water. No voices, no movement, only silence. A silence so heavy, as if the earth itself were remembering what had happened there. And from that point on, this story stopped being only a memory. It became a sign, a warning that time would not erase. Because there are sins that can be forgiven, but there are also sins that, once they become a system, an identity, an entire society, no longer bring a personal price alone. They bring total disappearance. The deepest lesson in this story is not only the punishment, but the signs that came before the punishment. It is the moment when people no longer see sin as sin, when they call what is wrong freedom, when they treat reminders as attacks, and especially when the people who know what is right choose silence just to preserve their comfort. Because that silence is not neutral. It is a quiet form of cooperation. In modern life, we do not live in Sodom, but we still face similar choices every day. You may not be building an entire corrupted society, but you can still contribute to one by accepting, overlooking, or refusing to speak when it matters. On the other hand, you can also be the one who keeps firm principles, even when that makes you different, even lonely. And sometimes that is the greatest test of all, not doing what is right when everyone supports you, but still holding to what is right when you are standing alone. If you want to understand stories like this more deeply, the lessons hidden inside history, and how to apply them to modern life, join the Prophetic History Explained community, so we can continue exploring valuable knowledge about the stories of the prophets, Islamic history, and the messages that can change the way you see the world. And do not forget to subscribe to support us, so we can continue bringing you content that is even more meaningful and more profound in the videos ahead.